minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, Wednesday night, April 29th, 1987. Lassiter with you until 11, as I am every weekday right here at News Talk 57 WPLP. And, of course, there's every fourth or fifth Saturday, and it's only fair warning this coming Saturday is a fourth or fifth Saturday. So we shall be with you from 9 a.m. in the morning until noon. And if you can do your math, you understand that I get off at 11. I get home around 11:30, an hour or two with the wife. And I'll be doing it on about 4 hours worth of sleep, so that in and of itself should be exciting, and you will not want to miss that. We'll break the show into two segments tonight. In the first segment, we have a guest on the long-distance line from his palatial estate right outside of Miami, the king of South Florida talk radio, Neil Rogers. Neil, welcome to WPLP.
What was that I heard about trailer courts at the beginning of the show? Is that who we're talking to, Bob?
Well, in some cases, in Zephyr Hills in particular, I'm very big into trailer courts. They discuss me constantly.
Excellent. Well, you know, when you're big into condos, the next step is the trailer courts.
Well, we don't have too many condos up here, Neil, so up here it's primarily trailer courts. I know that you're king of the condos in South Florida. Well, I am king of the trailer courts in Central Florida.
Excellent. Well, we got it covered from coast to coast tonight, Bob.
Absolutely, all the way. How are things going, Neil?
Day part in the modern history of this market, and
Go on, tell us what it was.
Well, it was a 7 share at midday, which is probably equivalent to about a 15 share at night when I used to be on. It's just an unheard of share, and I'm very proud of it. And I didn't do it because I cater to a particular group of condo commandos who want us to do boring radio. The public today wants to be entertained. They want to hear different things. They want to hear people talk in real life kind of language. They're not interested in fantasy. You know, for too long, broadcasters have been intoning, like Gary Owens on Laugh-In used to do with his hand over his ear. He used to do that spoof on the old typical radio booth announcer. That's passé. That's out of the past. People want to listen to people who can relate to real life and talk to them in a way that they can relate to.
Well, let's be honest with each other. Not everybody does, Neil. Not everybody does.
Well,
but there's something for everybody on the radio, and they are public airwaves.
Yeah. And if they don't like what I do, let them turn it off. Not write to the FCC, not call the management and get hysterical. There are 40 radio stations in a greater Miami market. I'm sure you've got
close to the same number.
Big number in the Tampa-St. Pete area. If they don't like what you do, if they don't like what you say, let them turn it off. If they don't like a particular program, if they think the soaps are too racy, let them turn it off. If they don't like a show that comes on cable, let them keep their children from watching it. You know, we have to come back to the day in this society when people start taking responsibility for their own actions, for raising their own children, and for making their own individual choices. And the idea that some group of religious fanatics gets Ed Meese to write threat letters to the Southland Corporation and 7-Eleven takes all the Playboy and Penthouse magazines off of the newsstand, where does it stop? What's it going to be next?
Well, I think we're missing a very important point, because one of the things the detractors are always screaming about, they're public airwaves. Yeah, they are public airwaves. And in Philadelphia, 1 out of 8 people want to listen to Howard Stern, roughly the same number of people in the city of New York. 1 out of 8. Those people are entitled, because they are public airwaves, to listen to what they want to listen to.
Absolutely.
29 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. Neil, let me ask you to stand by. I've got to take a break. Also, I want to open up the phone lines if anybody would like to talk to Neil. A lot of people up here I know used to live in the Miami area, probably old Neil fans or possibly even old Neil detractors, and would like to get in one last shot. You never know. I may never have him back on the program again. So we'll open up the phone lines right after this break.
To join in the conversation, the number to call in Hillsborough County.
Thank Bob.
.32 the time. Neil Rogers on the phone as my guest. Neil, I've got one of the letters in front of me, the one that was from to Mrs. Gore. I want to read it. It's not all that long, although it is a little rough, but I assume since the Federal Communications Commission sent it to me at a radio station, they must have realized that I'd end up reading it, so I guess in context it's okay. But to give the people an idea as to just what it is and the kind of mentality that sent the commission into issuing this April edict. Mind you, this is their example. Their example. Dear Mrs. Gore, last Saturday evening I sat listening to the radio. Once again, the station was KCSB 91.9. The announcer was Eric Stone. Eric plays heavy metal, punk, and what I will term raunch. He does a show from 9:30 to midnight entitled Strictly Disco. Don't ask me. The station is a college station centered under Storkey Tower on the University of California campus at Santa Barbara. Its staff is primarily made up of volunteers. There are, in fact, over 200. Its broadcast range stretches from Thousand Oaks on the southern end of Ventura County to San Luis Obispo, 99 miles north of Santa Barbara. KCSB produces a number of community service shows and caters to a wide cross-section of musical tastes. It provides good service to the community in its many community service programs. As far as quote-unquote rock shows go, I generally find very little to criticize, but as with everything, there is a point. The point here is violated by airing of extremely obscene lyrics. As you know, Section 1464 of the United States Criminal Code provides criminal penalties for uttering any obscene, indecent, or profane language by means of radio communication. The FCC is authorized under provisions of the Communications Act to revoke a broadcast license for violation of Section 1464, regardless of whether there has been criminal prosecution. Eric Stone, as is his wont, will generally throw in at least 2 extremely vulgar, sexually explicit songs per show. The others vary in shade and degree. Many are liberally sprinkled with the word fuck, or one of the number of variations thereof. If the use of a few expletives were all I had to contend with, then I wouldn't have bothered writing a letter. The problem is that a number of these tunes go far beyond the occasional obscenity. If these people were listening to these tunes in their homes, it wouldn't matter much either. But this is a broadcast over the public airwaves and available to all ages. Since most of us find it profitable to promote sound moral values, then it would seem reasonable to ask the media to maintain at least a minimal standard of decency. I don't think it's asking too much. Perhaps you are wondering about the kind of lyrics I'm referring to. Well, from this last Saturday night, they include, "Come here, baby, make it quick, kneel down there and suck on my dick. Makin' bacon is on my mind, makin' bacon is on my mind, turn around, baby, let me take you from behind." Or, "This is something, this is fine, another year, change the name, get it all, just talk too much, I'm only sucking city boys again." I have written the station about these lyrics, the chancellor, the governor, the FCC, the president of the university, all to no avail. The FCC is obviously not performing its job. It is more than clear that something has to be done about James Fowler. The airwaves are turning into a sewer under his leadership. And during his tenure, as you know, he has not dealt with one obscenity case. What I suppose I need to know is, where do I go from here? Who can I write to? This is a problem that needs a solution. If you have any ideas, I would appreciate them. Enclosed, find a recording I made, signed sincerely, Nathan W. Post, in Santa Barbara, California. I don't think one has to be overly intelligent to be able to read through or in between the lines in that letter. I mean, here's a man that sits home night after night listening to this crap, and it is crap. As far as I'm concerned, I don't mind saying it. It is crap. But here's a masochist.
Well, he's an expert. Just like the people that don't like you or don't like me, they can quote chapter and verse everything that we say. And here's a guy who's even too stupid to know the correct name of the former chairman of the FCC, but knows the section of the code, et cetera, and so on, right down to the detail, and also can quote chapter and verse every one of the lyrics that he was so bitterly offended by, and can tell how many times each night that this particular guy in the air plays records with offensive lyrics. Again, here is an individual who is going out of his way to be offended, and who's listening day after day after day, and now finally decides that he's going to become the censor and he's going to make himself a self-imposed moralist for everybody else.
We're also dealing here with a college radio station and kids on the air who are doing what kids have done down through the ages, trying to offend and shock their elders.
Well, but not only that, there are a lot of records that are borderline that are played by commercial FM stations all the time. A lot of old records, the Rolling Stones records. I'm sure that if somebody wants to bring up the old debate about the real lyrics in the song Louie Louie by the Kingsmen, we can open that one up again. You know, again, the bottom line is that nobody has any business censoring. If people are offended by the lyrics, then let them turn it off. I don't know of anybody, and I told Jim McKinney this, who's ever been hurt by words. You know, even when you're a kid, you use that old line, sticks and stones break my bones and words will never hurt me. Even little kids use that. People are not injured by words. And yet little kids can sit and watch every kind of violent act on the 6 o'clock news while they're eating dinner. They can see every kind of decapitation, every kind of violence in the movies, on cable and on commercial TV, all the sexual innuendo that commercial TV can get away with. No problem. The FCC doesn't care about it. Nobody is interested in censoring it. But if somebody comes on the radio now, this is the new routine, and uses certain words or dares to make sexual innuendo, then right away we're supposed to be intimidated. And what is so damn frightening about this is that they've made it so broad. Nobody knows what the hell they're really talking about. It's obvious even they don't know what the hell they're really talking about. They can't define the boundaries of what is good taste and what is sexual innuendo and what is indecent and what is obscene. You know, this whole concept of what is patently offensive. What a subjective thing. Something that may be patently offensive to you may be amusing and entertaining to me. I thought we already went through this with Lady Chatterley's Lover and D.H. Lawrence in Britain. Didn't they go through that very famous trial many years ago? And even though that work of art contains every word imaginable over and over and over, they decided that it wasn't obscene or offensive.
Well, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's absolutely hilarious. In one of the Commission's edicts back in the 1970s, when they were dealing with the 7 dirty words, in their edict they said, well, of course this doesn't apply if it's an Elizabethan comedy.
Yeah.
You know, well, that's cool. Let me read one more short excerpt from one of the letters of complaint talking about hiding behind your children. This letter, of course, was sent to Commissioner Mark Fowler, chairman of the FCC. It was also marked personal and confidential. But, you know, this is what we're talking about in terms of hiding behind children. Mr. Fowler, I have 6 children. If one of them had tuned into KPFK at the time that I did, they could have lost in 1 hour the precious innocence I, as a father, worked so hard to protect year in, year out. This isn't narrowcasting we're talking about. This is broadcasting, broad enough to be picked up by every child with a $5 transistor radio. Frankly, that hurts and angers me. It violates the values and sanctities of my home, my family, and my faith. I urge you, I beg you, I plead with you to take action immediately to stop station KPFK from broadcasting such content. On and on and on it goes, this heart-rendering stuff. Every kid with a $5 transistor. Well, every kid with a $5 transistor isn't listening to these kinds of stations because they don't play their kind of music.
Well, even if they were, the fact is that every one of those kids hears those words every single day. If they're over the age of 6 or 7, they probably by now know what the words mean or refer to. They're not going to be shocked by them. They're not going to be harmed by them. Again, it's a moot point. People are simply not injured by words. And one of the problems in this society is that we don't want to grow up. You know, the Western Europeans look upon us like little children, like juveniles. When it comes to sex, we can't grow up. When it comes to even language, we can't grow up. We're like a bunch of immature juveniles, and we pay a very dear price for it. You know, isn't it interesting that the television people, at the same time, the very next day after this ruling came down from the commission, the television people said lingerie commercials are now going to show real living, honest-to-goodness women modeling these all this lingerie with the nightgowns and the brasiers and so on. In Europe, they've been doing it for years, and they showed on our nightly news the comparison between the commercials in France and England, for example, which are much more explicit and much funnier, by the way, and much more open, and they've been doing that for years. And
in Brazil, they use nudity in commercials.
And here, finally, we're getting to the point where we're actually showing real women with real breasts in lingerie commercials. I mean, when the hell are we going to grow up?
St. Petersburg, hi, you're on the air at WPLP.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I have a question for Neil, if I may.
Sure.
A couple of months ago, you did the Hallandale Vice and all that number, and there was all that confrontation at the Diplomat Mall.
Yep.
What was the outcome of that, please?
Well, the outcome of it was that the overwhelming majority of the people agreed with me. And in fact, you know, that's a separate issue. But again, you know, it's interesting when I was doing that, and for the benefit of your listeners who don't know what that's all about.
Oh, they do. It was all over the papers up here. Of course, it was totally distorted.
It made the papers all the way to China, as a matter of fact.
Probably.
It was a spoof on people who behave a certain way, who go to early bird dinners and steal silverware and behave in a very patently offensive manner. And wouldn't you know that a lot of the old residents in Hallandale took up a petition drive to get me off the air because they didn't like what I was saying. And, of course, you know, the ratings speak for themselves. They've never been any higher in the 11 years I've been on the air in this market.
Are you still employed?
Yeah, well, as of today.
Oh, good. I mean, it hasn't worked.
So the outcome has been that they've done me a big favor. They haven't gotten me off the air. And again, these are people who are offended by what I said, even though it was true. Why didn't they just turn it off?
Exactly. The other question is, too, you used to do those wonderful ads for the, for example, for condoms and for, not sweet milk, but those,
yes, he still does.
I can't describe all the things. I mean, it was wonderful. I used to sit there and die. I used to laugh so hard. Are you still able to do that sort of thing?
Oh, yes. We haven't changed. In fact, if anything, the program is more wide open now than it ever was before.
Oh, that's terrific. I'm thrilled.
I told Mr. McKinney, in fact, when I had the fellow from the FCC on the phone, I used some of the expressions myself. I said, if I go on the air tomorrow and I call one of my callers a subhuman douchebag, is that going to fall under the heading that you're interested in banning? And again, he beat around the bush, wouldn't answer the question. And I used purposely several of the phrases. For example, I said, if Howard Stern calls somebody a dickhead, is that going to offend you? And again, you could tell that he just absolutely didn't want to give any kind of a guideline whatsoever. It would depend on what time of day it is, how many children are listening. This is all ludicrous. How the hell do we know how many children are listening at a given time?
The other question is...
Well, no, wait a second. That brings up an interesting point, because when we talked to the Federal Communications Commission last week, and of course they won't come on this program now after your show.
Yeah, we scared them away.
You sure did. But one of the things that they told us is that, especially concerning the children, how do you know when children are listening? We were trying to pin them down on this 10 o'clock or midnight or, just what time is it? Well, they said, well, you guys have Arbitrends, and you can go by that. You can look in the book and see. Well, my goodness, virtually every talk station in this country shows an absolute zero in 12 to 17.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing that he's talking about children between the ages of 12 and 17?
Yeah.
The reason they're not talking about kids under 12 is because, as you know, Bob, there are no measurements in any rating service of kids under 12.
That's right.
You don't count because they don't have any money and any buying power. So we're talking about teenagers, 12 to 17, and the idea that we're going to censor or we're going to change the material that we broadcast based on what teenagers are hearing because they might have their precious ears offended. You show me a 13 or 14-year-old kid who hasn't heard and doesn't use every word that's ever been invented, including George Carlin's 7, which is now 350. You show me, and I'll show you a kid who's living in a vacuum, in a bubble somewhere.
Thank you, St. Petersburg.
Okay, thank you.
Be good. Let's try this St. Pete line. Hi, you're on the air at WPLP.
Can I talk to Neil?
You sure can. Hello, Neil.
Neil?
Yes.
The people in the Bay Area, they don't expect homosexuals or a good friend of theirs like Bob to talk anything but filthy pig language.
Mm-hmm.
Go back where you come from.
That's why you listen to it every night, isn't it, dearie?
God for.
Yeah, we know about all those terrible homosexuals like Michelangelo and Gore Vidal and some of the most brilliant people in history. We know about all those terrible... See, here you come back to the hate mongers again.
And she's there every night, too. I love her. God love her.
But the point is, forget about her individually. The point is that the nature of the kind of people you're dealing with are the self-righteous, pious, self-appointed moralists who are going to tell all of us how to live and what to read and what to say. These people are fascist, plain and simple. And I want to remind everybody in your listening audience who isn't too excited about this issue that when they started in Nazi Germany, people laughed at that too. Everybody thought that this was an aberration. And they took away the homosexuals and the gypsies and the Jews and the Catholics and anybody who didn't fit into their mold of the perfect Aryan individual. And history shows very clearly what happened. And as the German philosopher said, when they start burning books, then they start burning people. And we saw it happen then, and the question is, do we want to wait until we start seeing it happen again by lovely people like this lady we just heard from a moment ago, who is the true decider of who is moral and who is immoral, who should live and who should die?
Seminole, you're on the air at WPLP.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi.
I know you didn't catch a show on TV last night, one of the news shows, but Randy Newman, the songwriter, was on, and one of the questions they asked him was censorship. And he says it's getting to the point with pop music now, and with the synthesized music, that a monkey could probably cut a pretty good album. Kids don't listen to music, the lyrics, they don't understand the lyrics. It's not important, it's just the noise. And there was another article not too long ago about this. He said you could say worship Satan throughout the whole record, and they go out in the street, worship Satan, wouldn't know what to do. But it's meaningless.
Well, besides, the only people that ever hear them say worship Satan are fundamentalist Christians.
Yeah, who listen to records backwards.
Right.
And evidently, Jim and Tammy Faye listened to too many records backwards because it obviously had a great impact on their behavior.
Well, that's a good point, Neil.
Absolutely. It's censorship, plain and simple.
You bet.
It's show business. That's all there is to it.
You got it.
Hillsborough, 224-0057, Pinellas, 393-0057. Neil, stand by. We'll take another break.
Are you an unpublished...
You don't say, Bob.
The time at News Talk 57 WPLP. I'm Bob Lassiter, my guest, Neil Rogers. By the way, had you thought about automated callers down there, Neil, on those slow days?
As a matter of fact, our entire show starting tomorrow is going to be on compact disc.
Well, it's just really fantastic. I mean, you can say almost anything you want. For example, gosh golly, I think the president's a great guy and does a fantastic job. Hey, let's take a call in St. Petersburg. Hi, St. Pete, you're on the air.
Yeah.
I disagree with everything you say.
Excellent.
Bob.
It helps on those slow days, Neil.
If we go back to that SOB, that stands for Sorry Old Bag, that called, a couple of calls back, I want to make a point to the people in your audience who, looking at this issue with any degree of objectivity. The overwhelming majority of obscene, obnoxious calls that we get at my station, the overwhelming majority of which are off the air, come to my producer, and you know who they come from? Sorry old bags like her. People who call in and use the most vulgar, the most disgusting, including all the 7 words, which also are banned on the telephone, which is regulated by the FCC, the most disgusting language that anyone could imagine. These are the good, the decent, the moral, these miserable, filthy old prunes who think that they're going to dictate the way all the rest of us in society are going to live and the way we're going to behave.
Oh, gee, you must have a different kind of audience down there.
We got
Seminole.
Same crowd you've got.
Hi, Seminole. You're on the air at WPLP.
Hi, could I speak to Neil, please?
Go right ahead.
Hello.
Hello, Neil.
Yes.
It's good to hear you again.
Thank you.
I miss listening to you. I used to live on the East Coast and listen to you avidly.
Great.
And I admire your guts. Oh, I'm telling you, you're great. Listen, of all this talk about censorship and what the FCC has done, nobody that I have heard has questioned why specifically the FCC cannot explain exactly what they are, what their ruling is.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you why. Because they want to make it sufficiently vague and ambiguous so that they can nail anybody they want. See, the commission is upset because they had these 3 cases in this hearing a couple of weeks ago, and the Howard Stern one has gotten the most publicity because he's been the most obvious personality involved, and they couldn't nail him because they listened to all of these tapes, they went through all of the letters and all of the complaints, and the fact is that Howard Stern was clever enough to avoid using any of the 7 banned words. He stepped right to the line but never stepped over it, and so under the old ruling they weren't able to nail him. In fact, the warning that the FCC sent to Stern and to Infinity Broadcasting that owns the 2 stations that he's heard on in New York and Philly, the warning they sent was the mildest form of warning that the commission said. It doesn't even go into the station's file. So it's really almost a meaningless letter. So now, like a bunch of petulant children, because they weren't able to nail him on that, now they've made this broad, vague, ambiguous ruling, and who knows who they're going to go after with this. If enough people write enough letters of complaint, who knows how many people they would like to take off the air if they can get away with it.
Well, I actually have the letter right in front of me, and it reads, "The Commission has received numerous complaints filed during the past 3 months concerning the broadcast of obscene or indecent programming on station WYSP-FM during the weekday morning periods by your announcer, Howard Stern, and others who appear on his program. It is our understanding that Mr. Stern's morning program originated at your co-owned station, WXRK-FM in New York, New York, and is simulcast on WYSP-FM. The complaint filed is available at the Commission's Washington office if you wish to review its contents. I'm attaching to this letter 3 specific complaints, which are the most descriptive as to the type of material being complained of. They are a letter dated September 26th from this guy in Tupelo, Mississippi, a letter dated November the 6th from the same man in Tupelo, Mississippi, and the letter dated October the 27th from Mary V. Keeley, who was a member of Morality in Media. Also attached is a transcript prepared for this office from the tape recording submitted by Mary V. Keeley. As you know, the Commission has statutory authority to take appropriate regulatory action where the licensee engages in the broadcast of obscene or indecent programming.
Look, I always thought that a law or a ruling had to be specific in order for them to come down on the person that broke the law or the ruling. So
that's true. I said to Jim McKinney, I said, how would you feel if you drove out into the middle of a highway in a strange area and there were no speed limit signs? And the Florida Highway Patrol were sitting waiting for you in the woods, and you were going 35 miles an hour, and you thought the speed limit ought to be 50, and they pulled you over and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, but we're going to give you a ticket because the speed limit is 15. How would you know it? How would you know what the law is? I mean, that's bad enough that they're not even willing to be specific, but of course the real broad issue that we ought to keep in mind is they have no damn business censoring free speech. There is nothing in the Constitution, and there's certainly nothing in the FCC Act of 1934 that gives them the right to abridge freedom of speech. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Well, now, I beg your pardon. There is something in the Constitution that gives them the right. The Supreme Court has made it very clear where that free speech does damage to some other innocent individual.
Well, we're talking
and
about,
it behooves the
we're
complaint.
talking about libel and slander laws, and nobody is debating those. But short of that,
it's the old,
talking about free expression.
It's the old hollering fire in the crowded theater.
Well,
you can clearly demonstrate damage.
Even that is debatable. Even that isn't clear cut. And again, I don't want to debate that and take us back 100 years to have to go through that debate. I would agree that when anyone's speech jeopardizes the safety of another individual, or when somebody slanders another individual, certainly that ought to be actionable. I don't want to take away any business from the attorneys. But when we start getting into business of determining what is good taste, the idea that a group of senile bureaucrats or any other group is going to make themselves self-appointed censors is unacceptable in a free society. And again, if somebody finds something patently offensive to them, turn it off. There are people who found Venus de Milo patently offensive. Others consider it to be a great work of art. It's subjective.
You want to know something, Neil, the way I look at it? True, the main point is they're trying to take away freedom of speech. But in a certain sense, you should be glad they are not specific, because should they take away the license of a radio station for anything, they cannot possibly win in court.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to let it get that far. That's why I'm running this So Far campaign.
Well, I thank you for running it.
We want to do everything in our power to force them to rescind this and at least take us back to where we were before a couple of weeks ago, and let us just have the specific ruling on the 7 words. That's as far as we're willing to let them go.
Largo, you're on the air at WPLP.
Yeah, gentlemen, I kind of agree with you. The street language is pretty raunchy, but I don't think there's any concerted effort to saturate the airwaves with just plain cursing. But what worries me is there's a big hint of despotism and even dictatorship creeping into our several social privileges, like our school, our radio, our library. Radio and TV censorship starts with our news broadcasts, if you want to get right down to it. And, of course, there'll always be a few deviants who think that shucks and gosh darn, what was that in trombones, 76 trombones, the words he used, like cool? We're getting a little bit hypo. And I'm just afraid I won't be able to walk up and say good morning to a pretty lady without going to jail. That's what's worrying me.
Yeah, and then, of course, we have the video movie police who run around in the video stores where they sell Mary Poppins in the front and Debbie Does Dallas in the back, and they're determining what is pornographic and what people can buy and what they can't buy and what is obscene on bumper stickers. You know, it's just gotten insane. It's like the whole country has gone nuts because of the right wing, the fanatic people who want to determine everything that we can do. Well, I think George Orwell was just 3 years ahead of his time, that's all.
I'm old enough to smoke involved in Dachau, face-to-face, and help take some of the poor people out. And I can't help feeling when I run into this kind of situation that a bunch of them went there and died because they tried to say what they wanted to say. Even though it wasn't a curse word, at least it was a and say. And that's what we need to protect. Whatever the words are, we need to stand up and say.
Thank you much, caller.
Fellas.
Be good.
Bye-bye.
Neil, I'm just about out of time for this hour. Do you want to stick with me for at least a little while in the next hour?
Yeah, I'd like to stick around and let people know what our P.O. Box number is and let them get some of these petitions. And also, being nonprofit, we're now soliciting for money for people who believe in the First Amendment, want to put their money where their mouth is, literally, because we're planning on putting newspaper ads in major papers all over the country. So I'd really would like the opportunity to get to your folks, because I know you've got a lot of sensible people over there.
Okay, very good. CBS News coming at you. Let's try that again. CBS News coming at you at the top of the hour. We shall return in about 6 minutes with my guest, Neil Rogers, on the long-distance line. Please, whatever you do, don't venture very far.
AM stations on, although at this point I can't envision any of the AM competitors, but they're getting involved in it. And I hope everybody gets involved, because the game plan is that the week before the 4th of July, and of course this year...
Wait a second, you mean Steve Kane's not going to be on with you?
God forbid. We're celebrating the 200th, the bicentennial of the Constitution this year, and on that 4th of July weekend, or just prior to it, we're going to dump all of these petition signatures from all over the country on the doorstep of the FCC. The ACLU, as you know, is very much involved and wants to be involved, and we anticipate we're going to get a lot of support from them. And the idea being that we're going to try to pressure the FCC. I mean, if they're going to respond to 69 letters in Philadelphia, then one would certainly think that hundreds of thousands of signatures from American citizens all over the country would have a heck of a lot more impact and force them to come back to some common sense. If that should fail, We certainly aren't going to give up then, because I've already spoken to Congressman Larry Smith, and the plan after that would be to try to get Congress to revise the entire FCC Act of 1934. You know as well as I do that that's an obsolete act. I mean, that's 53 years ago. The FCC today should serve no purpose other than a bookkeeping service. They ought to monitor technical aspects of radio, and they ought to monitor ownership changes and transfer of licenses, period. That's the only function they should serve. They're obsolete in every other area.
Well, there's one thing
anachronism.
There's one thing that we seem to have forgotten in this country, and that is you don't have to put up with everything that's going on, and you can change things. But the way you change things in this country, if you don't like what Neil Rogers is doing, if you don't like what Bob Lassiter is doing, if you don't like what Howard Stern is doing, or anybody else, and if you really find it offensive, and you can find a lot of other people that find it offensive, then come and walk in front of the radio station and carry signs that'll scare the hell out of the general manager if there are enough of you, and you'll put an end to it. But you don't go and play with the Constitution.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, the people in Hallandale, for example, who sat in front of Publix with their petitions to get me off the air, while I found it amusing, I never at any point said, hey, they don't have a right to do this, or let's stop them from doing it because they want to jeopardize my career. If that's what they wanted to do, they had a right to do it. Obviously, it didn't work, and there are a hell of a lot more people who want to listen than not. But, again, that's part of their constitutional freedom, and whether someone agrees or disagrees is not relevant. What is important that at least we have the right to express a different opinion.
One other thing I want to come back to before we get back to the phones. By the way, there's one line open in each county: Hillsborough 224-0057, Pinellas 393-0057. I'm very interested in the number of colleagues, media people in Miami Market who are joining with you, because so far, not a one in this particular community has contacted me in any shape, manner, or form. And, you know, the petition that you sent me and that I'm sending out, by the way, the first batch of them went out in the mail today, so those of you who have sent should be receiving them tomorrow or the following day. But the petition says nothing about Bob Lassiter or Neil Rogers or WINZ or WPLP.
Correct.
This is a major issue that affects each and every one of us. And I am so sick and tired of running into my colleagues in the media and having them say, you know, gee, Bob, I listen to your show every night. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Where the hell are you people on this one? You know, just to be as blunt as I can possibly be, where the hell are you people, especially those of you at Q105 who sit there and monitor this program virtually every single night to see if I say anything about you?
Yeah, well, virtually all of the media people in this town listen to me, and, you know, I'm still wondering where some of the folks at the Miami Herald are. Bill Cosford had a great
I saw that.
column for me in the Herald on Sunday, and there have been some other positive columns. Even Neanderthal Charlie Whitehead had a good positive column. The Herald editorial, as Cosford pointed out, was one of the saddest things they've ever written in defending the FCC. But this affects all of us. And I guarantee you that if the FCC, if the government tried to censor what's in newspapers, and of course they're not regulated like we are in broadcasting, the Herald and all the other newspapers, the St. Pete Times and the Tampa Tribune and all of them would scream bloody murder.
Well, I'm not so sure about the Herald anymore. I mean, they have actually come out publicly and stated that they're going to try to make a pitch for that Latin community down there, which is just as far right as you can get.
Yeah, but again, they don't want anybody telling them how to do it or what to print. In fact, a very well-publicized case, the Pat Tornillo case, which the Herald took toward and won, and in essence said that we can't abridge the right of a free press. And, you know, that's the bottom line. And if they have the right to print any damn thing they want, if the Village Voice can print all of the words and then some, if Mother Jones can print anything that they want, or Rolling Stone, then why in the world shouldn't we be able to express the same thoughts and ideas? Again, if people don't want to read the Village Voice, they don't buy it. If they don't want to hear me because they're offended by some of the language or the subject matter or the satire, they don't have to listen. You know, how many times do we have to hack away at this thing? Censorship in a free society has got to be an individual choice, period. And if you don't want your children to hear it, don't let them hear it. Don't let them watch it, whatever. Police your own children.
Or better still, give them the moral values that you want them to have when they're young, so that when they grow up and they turn on the radio, they'll hear this stuff and say, that's not what I'm into. Let me turn it off.
Yeah. Or if they do hear it, they realize that it's just entertainment and they're not offended and shocked by the words, or not so juvenile as to go into culture shock because they're not used to being exposed to them.
One additional piece of business before I go back to the phones. I have already collected $120 unsolicited up here that I'll be forwarding on to you. You said you wanted to give out a P.O. box number?
I sure do, and I hope everybody gets a pen or pencil and writes this down, because this is a non-profit organization. All of the money will be accounted for, the overwhelming majority of it, of course, in addition to that, which will go for postage and printing and so on. The overwhelming majority is going to go into newspaper ads and as many major papers as we can. The station, obviously, is not running the campaign, nor they like it to appear that they're running the campaign. It is an independent campaign that I started. They are supportive of it. They've been good enough to give me all the airtime I want. In fact, they're even going to run public service announcements in support of it. But I think it is important for people to realize that this is an independent campaign that's been started by individual broadcasters, not just by me, but with the support of you and people in other parts of the country who want to defend our right to have free speech, period.
Tampa, hi, you're on the air, WPLP.
To talk on First Amendment rights or the Kremlin. And, Neil, I'll commit myself to 100 signatures and send it to you.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
I feel that the only true democratic forum we have in our country today are talk shows. It has revived our forefathers' dreams of real democracy as practiced by them.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
In the old town meetings...
It does sound kind of corny, but this is literally the town meeting.
Yeah. There's nowhere that the public can air their feelings so strongly. There are those in public office who will not want their credibilities or their government policies questioned, and so on, and would like nothing more than to stop this democratic forum reaching the public. So if these same people would stoop so low as to burglarize Watergate, to undermine our two-party democratic system, and just recently to mislead our Congress, as they have in Iran and Nicaragua, undermining our democracy at its very heart, would they not place persons on talk shows to discredit the only media we have of the people, by the people, for the people, to air their thoughts, feelings, and ideas? True democracy.
A very good point.
I appreciate you two very much. And Neil,
yes,
I'm glad we have a Lassiter in Miami and a Rogers in Tampa. You guys are great.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I just got demoted, but I appreciate the kind words.
Well, Neil, no, you didn't get demoted. To these people up here, I am what you are to those people down there. High compliment.
There's a point that needs to be made, and I don't know where the last gentleman was from, but I detected a little bit of an accent. You know, we have a huge Cuban and Latin population here in this part of the state. And I'm hearing from some of those people now, and amazingly, even though many of them politically are very conservative and have a lot of views that are different from mine and probably yours, people who come from societies that where repression has reigned for many, many years, people who lived under Castro, people who lived under the fascist Batista before him, people who lived where censorship reigned supreme, those people really value free speech, or at least some of them do. And they're terrified by the idea because they're beginning to see the same types of things being attempted to be done by people in our government here and by other repressive types as they had to live under themselves. And you'd be surprised at how many of them are really picked up on this thing and are supporting us.
Fantastic. Have you polled our illustrious senators and congressmen as to where they might stand on this?
No, it's a little bit early for that. But Larry Smith, who's been super with us in terms of working with the FCC and a lot of other areas, Larry broadening this. So we've already got a pledge of support from Larry in a lot of areas, and he's doing his thing quietly now. We're going to have him on our show down here in a couple of weeks.
Clearwater, your turn at WPLP.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, I identify myself with the fact that I have sent for one of your envelopes on the SOFAR.
Great, you should be getting it soon.
Okay, and Mr. Rogers still on?
I sure am.
Okay, I have another organization called PMAS. That's called the Self-Perpetuating Mutual Admiration Society. Gentlemen, I think that you've taken this First Amendment thing to the point to where you're brainwashing people, like that gentleman you called just a moment ago, that you're thinking that the First Amendment is going to be abridged, and it's not.
Well, let me ask you a question. I'm a little confused. You started by saying that you sent your envelope in for the petition.
That's correct.
And now you're saying that we've taken it to the point where we're brainwashing the public.
Well, fine. I want to see what the SOFAR stands for, and if it stands for something, I'll stick with it. However, I think, gentlemen, and I'm going to call you gentlemen, and very intellectual, articulate gentlemen, but I think that you're not telling the people the truth. The only thing that, as I see it, now, if I'm wrong, please tell me.
1 second. If we're not telling the people the truth, why don't you correct us right here and now?
I think that the only thing, and I haven't heard on this program tonight, except one HELL in the whole discussion that you had, And I think that the only thing that the FCC is trying to do is to cut out the garbage.
Well, what is garbage, sir?
Okay, garbage has happened to be this. I went down just...
Well, sir, hold on right there, and I will actually read to you a transcript as sent to me by the Federal Communications Commission today of the Howard Stern Show as not an example, but as the actual complaint. This is what the actual complaint is based upon.
No, but wait a minute.
And I'll be delighted to read it to you.
No, let's not waste the time with that, Bob, because that muddies the waters. We're not talking about the complaint, because since the complaint, they have broadened their interpretation of the previous decision, which now says that material that is patently offensive, which describes sexual organs or excretory activities,
correct,
or it contains sexual innuendo or sexual material, which is broadcast at a time when children are likely to be listening, is
correct,
prohibited. Now, what the hell does that mean?
Okay, sir. Now, let me give you an example. I was down yesterday. I was going to a cafeteria in a parking lot, and here this character comes out. And you see, incidentally, gentlemen, you are intellectuals, role models, understand it? And if you perpetuate this garbage, this kind of,
well, sir, you keep using the word garbage. What is garbage?
Garbage happens to be like I got out of my car, walking across the driveway to the cafeteria, and here this guy who happens to be one of the perpetuators of the freedom of speech that didn't know the English language other than four-letter words, insulted me, my wife, and impacted this kind of garbage on everybody around him.
But that's not what we're talking about, sir.
But if
nobody's using that
and use the same language,
nobody's trying to use that kind of language, sir.
You haven't done it tonight,
sir.
You haven't done it tonight. But what I'm suggesting is that you're role models, and if you perpetuate this kind of a thing over the airwaves, here I am. What do I do with this?
Sir, nobody is. Sir, would you like to hold a conversation or just deliver a monologue? Because if you want to deliver a monologue, you're going to have to send a tape and a resume to the PD. I get to deliver the monologues here.
Well, they're all models. I hope.
Well, sir, I'm going to try it one more time before I hang up on you, sir.
Sir, we're not role models. We're entertainers, okay? Just like Eddie Murphy's an entertainer.
No, I thought you were more than
just like Richard Pryor's an entertainer. We're not role models for anybody.
Entertainer on a stage.
The bottom line is that if you don't like what we say, you don't have to listen.
Oh, come on now.
Who's holding a gun to your head, sir?
Ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
No, it's not ridiculous.
Do you suffer from mental palsy? Is that your problem? In other words, if you hear something that's offensive to you on the radio or on television, are you incapable of turning it off?
No, sir, because if you perpetuate this on the airwaves, then I have to put up with it on the street. What do I do with it on the street?
Sir, do you think children are learning from the radio the words they're using on the street?
Absolutely.
You do.
You're almost
Sir, let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard a child under the age of 18 in the Tampa Bay area use the F word? Have you ever heard a child use the F word, sir? Where the hell did they learn it, sir?
They learn it from you guys.
Oh, sir, but you've never heard it used on the radio.
Sir, you are a total idiot. You're a moron and an imbecile.
Come on, gentlemen. Do you propose that this be included in the vernacular?
No, sir.
In the English language and teaching how...
No, sir, don't. No, sir, we don't.
Sir, it's even legal for people to be morons like you are. Even that's legal in America, sir, and you're not listening to a damn thing that anybody's saying.
Sure I am.
No, you're not.
Could have fooled me, sir. Tampa, you're on the air at WPLP.
Time for the daily update, Bobby boy.
Oh, really? Oh, this is the petitioner, Neil. This guy is out in front of the Circle K getting petitions to get me off the air.
I just hit Carolwood, 202, Bobby boy.
Is your friend Jim still with you tonight?
No, he's not, because I'm at my office at Barnett.
Oh, your office at Barnett, I see.
Why don't you use your real voice, jerk? Why don't you use your real voice?
Well, he did last night. See, last night we asked him why he didn't have any friends, and last night he said, well, I happened to be a friend's house, and I said, well, put the friend on. And, you know, the remarkable thing was, Neil, the friend sounded just like this guy not pinching his nose.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
amazing.
Think it's, Bobby boy, I'm going to hit Port Tampa.
I don't think it's
I'll bet you are going to hit Port Tampa.
I don't think it's your nose.
And I'm going to hit MacDill Air Force Base, and then I'm going to go up to Clearwater, all the way down to St. Petersburg.
Good. Why don't you do a real good job, pal? Then you can come down to Miami to Hallandale and get me off the air, too, you moron.
Gee, I'm really delighted. This is a real great exercise.
I have no interest in talking with you.
I thought we had all the Neanderthals down here.
No, I got a couple up here.
I thought we had all the pinheads down here. Man,
come on, Neil. This is
there.
what makes this show what it is in the Tampa Bay area. It's callers like him.
Great.
Is that all, Petitioner?
You know, you're going to be living on the streets pretty soon, Bobby boy.
Yeah.
Well, you never know. I just might be.
The only way you're going to get back on is get on your knees and ask for forgiveness.
Sir, it sounds to me like you're on your knees right now, but that's another story.
Well, that's what he's going to Port Tampa for.
We just
imbecile talking on the other line, so please remain silent.
Yeah. Good luck to you, sir. Have a great life.
Tampa, you're on the air, WPLP.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm the wrong person to be calling in because I'll be honest, I haven't been listening to very many of the shows that the people are criticizing, but I still have an opinion about it.
Well, go ahead.
Am I allowed?
This is America. You can have an opinion about anything.
Great. You know, I agree with a couple of gentlemen back mentioned about the fact that the free speech, the freedom of the press and the freedom of the radio and TV and all that, they serve a critical role in our government and in our society. That's true. No one can doubt, how much they've helped inform the people and how much that they've, brought out things that others were trying to hide, everything from Watergate on down. But it seems that, some areas that, especially in entertainment, that some of the people, it seems like whenever they're, if I could use Saturday Night Live, for example, it seems like when their creativity, was lost and they were becoming bankrupt as far as what to do, they're just getting raunchier and raunchier and trying to make up for it.
I totally disagree with you. That may be true in the case of some individuals who don't have, and there are some who can't be creative without using four-letter words.
Yeah.
But once upon a time, although I will say, even going back to Shakespeare, you'd find some pretty racy language, including some of the 7 words. But once upon a time, in most American novels, for example, you wouldn't find very much of the language. And once we finally began to grow up, some of the greatest novelists of our time, Hemingway, a lot of others, began including the language because it became commonplace. It was no longer shocking. It was just a reflection of real life and the way people speak and really behave. And again, nobody is shocked by that when they open up a novel or a romance novel today or any kind of a literary work. They'll find the language in there frequently. Nobody gets uptight or upset about it except those people, again, who want to keep us in the dark ages.
It would seem to me that if people wanted to get rid of shocking language, the best way to do it is to let everybody use it. Then it has no shock value and it just goes away all by itself.
Yeah.
I agree there. I mean, one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are so darn susceptible to it is because they're trying to either, try and put on this false piety and all that. They don't say it as if it doesn't exist or as if it hurts or something. I think that maybe if you're just more honest or more realistic, that it doesn't, I don't think it's, that, how can I, explain that, I don't know. I mean, it's just that, for example, sexual activity and all that.
God forbid, sir. God forbid.
Okay. Oh. One of the reasons why I think that that a person, for example, that's kept in a house all the time in cold weather and never goes out, the first time he encounters a cold germ, he's going to come out with a bad case of pneumonia or something. Whereas the exposure to the germ helps him build up an immunity. He will have no problem with it when he is exposed to it. I think it's like that with other problems, whether it be obscenity or all of the some of the vices. I think that it's not good just to try and keep yourself hidden from it or hide it from you.
Well, there's so much truth in what you're saying, and it is so easily proven. You can go to Brazil, you can go to Scandinavia, you can go to France, where they're very open about their sexuality, including in the media. They don't have the problems of sexual crimes that we have here. People aren't abusing their children. People aren't raping old women in the streets. They don't have these problems.
As a matter of fact, the adolescents in Western Europe have all the sex that the adolescents in this country do, and maybe then some, but certainly just as much based on all of the studies that have been done. And yet the rate of unwanted teenage pregnancy in Western Europe is so fractional of what it is here that it ought to be embarrassing to us. And again, because we don't want to talk about these things openly and honestly, we've got these Neanderthal right-wingers who continue to say that as long as we don't talk about it, as long as they don't hear about it, nobody's going to do it.
Well, they're cowards because they hide behind their kids. It's not the kids they're worried about. It's their own little ears they're worried about.
I don't know, you're right. It's probably an example of the fact that we're more afraid of ourselves. We're showing our own attitude or our own inability to cope with it rather than, like you say, protecting our youngsters and all that. But you were mentioning Europe, the fact that they've got less of a birth rate, even though, the activity of their children are the same. From what I understand that their abortion rate is significantly higher. There's a lot of other things that, enter into it.
Let me say it again. I didn't say less of a birth rate. I said less unwanted pregnancy. Not just abortion, but far fewer young women who are becoming pregnant without wanting to. That's a totally different story from abortion. I don't want to get into
teenage pregnancy is what you're talking about, primarily teenage pregnancy, wanted or unwanted. Their instance is far lower than ours.
Yep.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
Neil, let me ask you to stand by again. I've got to take another break.
That put you on the air at WPLP are in Hillsborough County, 224-0057. In Pinellas County, 393-0057. And anywhere else, toll-free, 1-800-334-0057. Station.
All right, but that's not what I called to talk about, Bob.
9:34 the time. Neil, can you say crotch on your radio station?
We sure can.
55% of them, 55% of the radio stations in this country say you can't. Can you say up yours?
Oh, yeah.
52% say that you can't.
By the way, your audience would be fascinated to know that Mr. McKinney from the FCC, this Neanderthal I had on a couple of weeks ago, is very proud of the fact that the commission has come so far into the, into the 17th century, that about 20 years ago, they lifted the license of a station in Greensville, South Carolina, because the disc jockey on the air kept saying repeatedly, "Come on, kids, let it all hang out, let it all hang out," and they repeated it over and over again, and they actually took away the station's license. And Mr. McKinney was very proud of the fact that here in 1987, if the incident happened again, they wouldn't take away the license. Doesn't that indicate we've really come a long way?
Well, I don't think we've come a long way at all, because you interrupted me before I got to the third and final word, booger.
Oh.
As in, picking your nose, booger.
God forbid.
62% of the radio stations sampled said, well, that would be inappropriate language for us. I mean, so we don't have a big problem here.
No, we really don't.
Booger is unacceptable.
Much ado about
booger.
It's much ado about nothing, and it's just another attempt by the right-wing extremists to try to tell us what we can do. It's interesting, because I know you've got a lot of rednecks over there in your neck of the woods.
Well, pink necks.
And because the guy from Circle K certainly was brown-bagging it, I could tell by the way he was talking. And if the bill by Senator Childers in Tallahassee should pass, heaven forbid, one of the bumper stickers that would immediately be banned under the definition of sexual and excretory activity would be the one that says, "If you ain't country, you ain't SH." I'm sure you've got a lot of those up in your area on the pickup trucks and on the all the other similar vehicles. That's another one. So even some of the same people who are behind all of this would have to go out there and scrape off their bumper stickers.
Yeah, think about that, guys.
Wouldn't be able to display their Neanderthal mentality to the public anymore.
Hillsborough, 224-0057, one line open. St. Pete, hi, you're on the air, WPLP.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
My question is, we have rivalries in football. And, where people put on their bumper stickers like "Go to Hell Gators" or "Go to Hell Seminoles" or maybe "Go to Hell Hurricanes," depending on the school you attend. Does that mean it's going to be outlawed too?
That'll probably be next.
Yeah, conceivably. That's kind of profane language there.
To show you how Neanderthal they are here in Hollywood, in Broward County, on a Hollywood beach, we've got a big to-do because there are kids running around with T-shirts that say "Life is a beach," not bitch, but B-E-A-C-H. Life is a beach. And we have a bunch of little old prunes, little old ladies who are rattling their spears and having a nervous breakdown and trying to get the powers that be to outlaw the wearing of these T-shirts in public.
I mean, holy cow.
Yeah, that's a true story.
It's laughable, but it isn't.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I read books, names, Steinbeck and...
God forbid.
Well, they didn't offend me, but what gets... And I get tickled when I read Sports Illustrated when they have their swimsuit issue.
Yeah.
Cancel my subscription because of the women in the swimming suits. And these come from school teachers, parents.
Well, to show you the mentality of a lot of these people, if a 17-year-old boy hears somebody utter a suggestive phrase or a certain word on the radio, we feel he's going to go to hell in a handbasket. Mm-hmm. But then the day of his 18th birthday, we can hand him a gun and say, "Go out and kill people," and that makes him a real man.
Well, what do you mean on his 18th birthday? From the time that he can open his eyes, we feed him people shooting people and call it babysitting.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, thank you a lot.
Thank you, caller. Hillsborough, 224-0057, one line open. Same story in Pinellas, 393 operator 57 for Pinellas County. St. Pete, hi, you're on the air, WPLP.
Thank you, Bob. I wanted to say something about what's offensive because, as you know, I'm a minister. For those people who are religious and are offended by the words, they should remember that in Russia, if they want the government to do their thinking for them in Russia, that it's offensive to the government for people to tell their kids about God. You know, they shouldn't discuss God in front of them. They shouldn't tell them to read the Bible or let them...
Well, it's offensive for a lot of people in this country for parents to tell their children about a different kind of God. I mean, we already have that here.
Yeah, so, you know, once you let the government start controlling your morals for you, or controlling what you can say or think, you know, they're going to go all the way. And as you mentioned before, there's this type of person who says, please don't do so-and-so because Pete won't like it, or Joe won't like it. And what they really mean is they don't like it, and they want someone else to control their morals for them because they really have no self-control. What they're really saying is, please don't show me this because, you know, I don't know what I might do.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty sad that people, again, want to make all the judgments for all of society based on their own determinations. Again, we have to take, I said it before, and we can't say it often enough, whether we talk about what's going on in the criminal justice system, no matter what aspect of American life, whether we talk about parents talking to their kids about sex and AIDS and all the other things that so desperately need to be discussed, we can't expect school teachers to take all the responsibility. We can't expect anybody else to take responsibility. We have to start taking responsibility for our own individual actions. And censorship has to be a series on an individual basis of choices that we consciously make about what we want to read, what religion we want to practice or not, as the case may be, what movies we want to watch, what we want to listen to on radio, what newspapers, what magazines. These are individual choices in a free and open and truly democratic society. And it can't be open season on a group of self-appointed moralists to determine what the exceptions are. There are no exceptions.
You know, what I don't like is that these people that want the government to do their thinking for them never take that first step, which is open to them, which is to write to the individual who they find offensive and tell him why they would appreciate it if he would not use that particular language, and ask him, you know, in other words, go to the person. When we have confrontation between the person who is offended and the person who is offending him, and they talk to each other, or at least communicate to each other, there could possibly be a resolution. But when you immediately go to your police to tell your next-door neighbor to turn down his stereo, or when you go to the police to tell your next-door neighbor that you didn't like the word he said last week, then, of course, you're never going to resolve anything because...
Well, let's look at another aspect, too. You said you were a minister?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that you find it patently offensive. That's probably the understatement of the century. To be hearing and reading and watching about the activities of the PTL Club and Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, I find it patently offensive. I don't want to take away their right, but I find it patently offensive that Oral Roberts can come on television from coast to coast over the same airwaves on commercial television stations and use religion as a scam, as so many of these other people are doing, raising money under the cloak of God and religion to operate a total charade and scam that people are becoming millionaires like the Bakers and others. That's patently offensive, and yet the same Federal Communications Commission that's so uptight about Howard Stern and a few other people making sexual jokes or innuendo on the air, they have no concern whatsoever about the chicanery and the rip-off of the public by these fakers.
Yeah, well, you may not realize it, but it isn't just freedom of speech that's been under attack. You know, there's also, and these people you mentioned aren't doing anything to help, but there's also attacks going on in freedom of religion, and people who want to teach their children in a private school or whatever, you know, being harassed by the government for doing it, people who aren't particularly, you know, outrageous in what they're teaching. And so, you know, I look at it that there is a concerted attack, really on many fronts on our freedoms, and it's like someone is trying every possibility to take away the freedoms, and they'll try from every angle. And all they have to do is convince a few people here and a few people there is, yeah, that's really reasonable to take away that person's freedom because he really doesn't think the way we do.
Yeah.
And then over here, we take a little bit away over there. Like back in the 70s, we had the gas shortage, and there was this outrageous statement that they were going to issue travel passes to people.
Yeah.
And that whole thing was put up in the first place.
You make some very good points, and I thank you for them.
Thank you.
Bel Air, hi, you're on the air at WPLP.
Hello, Bob.
Hi.
And guest.
Yes.
This is my second call to you, Bob, and felt compelled to call tonight. Listened to about a half hour of your program on the way home. And the thing that baffles me, sounds to me like there's a lot of premature paranoia, especially with broadcasters and people involved in the media.
How's that?
Well, we're talking about the First Amendment, if I understand your conversation.
Well, that's correct.
And then I hear innuendo about bumper stickers, and I think
no, it's not innuendo. That is fact.
Well, I'll tell you something, Bob.
There is legislation pending up in Tallahassee.
I'm a pretty liberal guy, but I see no value to a family man driving down the highways having to look at bumper stickers that are just grotesque.
Well, sir, I'm deeply offended by many of the bumper stickers I see, too, especially those that are religious in nature.
Yeah,
why would the so-called silent...
Hold it. Can I say something?
Sure.
Some of the callers are throwing around terms that are really very interesting. We had a previous caller using the word garbage. Mm-hmm. Now we have a caller using the word grotesque. Can you define what a grotesque bumper sticker is?
Well, I think that if you take the terminology expressed in the so-called 7 dirty words, and I would add to it and make it around 15 words, and I'm not above using these words. I think that discretion is very important, but like several callers back, I think the elderly gentleman that called and said perpetuating a society that's redundant enough to have a vocabulary that the only way they can express themselves is by using profane language to the general public or using it over public airways is ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. I'm not for censorship, and I didn't call to aggravate you guys, but I don't understand. I really don't understand.
Well, then you don't understand the directive of the Federal Communications, sir, because it is just a total sham. It is vague. It doesn't tell us what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. It's kind of like the old Supreme Court justice. They don't know what's obscene, but they'll sure know it when they hear it.
But why, Bob? I've listened to your show a few times, and I can't truly believe that deep inside Bob Lassiter's mind that he can go along with the type of garbage that some of these broadcasters are ever... I've never heard...
Sir, wait a minute.
I've never heard...
And here we go with garbage. Here we go with garbage.
I'll use the word garbage to describe something that's offensive.
The bottom line is... Wait a minute. You don't want to have a conversation. When you say offensive, again, that's a subjective decision that you as a listener make.
And I think that's what America's all about.
Well, wait a second.
Exactly. And if Howard Stern is #1 rated in New York, the largest market in the country, then obviously there are an enormous number of people to whom he is not patently offensive.
Well, let me jump in here. Wait a second, guys.
There are plenty of people in our society.
Guys, wait 1 second here. Let me jump in here because, first of all, Neil, you and I differ on this. You find nothing offensive with Howard Stern.
No,
I do.
Wait a minute. I didn't say that. I think Howard Stern's the funniest man on the radio in America today.
I think he's one of the most boring.
You probably love Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, I do enjoy Eddie Murphy.
Have you ever seen him?
I do enjoy Eddie Murphy. I think he's hysterical. But again, that's my individual choice. Eddie Murphy would be a poor guy on the street if a lot of people decided
there's a big difference.
Well, no, wait a second. Let me finish my thought on this. Because, caller, I agree with you. I will sit here and say unequivocally that much of what Howard Stern is doing is garbage, in my humble opinion. But who in the hell am I to dictate to somebody else what is garbage?
Well, I
can say it's garbage and turn it off.
I would agree with that, and I think that's what the basic problem is, Bob.
But we've got a handful of people who want to sit in Washington, D.C. and decide for the rest of us what is garbage.
Right,
that's the problem.
Where do you draw the proverbial line? That's all I'm trying to say is I understand the point. I understand why people like yourself are upset. I think it's a bit premature. That's just my opinion. I think what you're trying to say, if I understand you correctly after listening to several of your shows, is that where does it stop and how far will they go? But One quick thing I would like to add. If you've interacted at all with many Europeans, people who've come to this country, you will find, I think you mentioned, I think you mentioned Sweden. Did I hear Sweden?
Well, I said Scandinavian countries. Sweden is certainly one of them.
But if you talk to most Europeans, the first thing that really puts them back is the use of the English language in America. They are totally shocked with the redundant way that people communicate in public. There's no purpose to it. I use profane language myself. I'm not a
be any more
do it in public. I do it in the privacy of my house.
Any more incorrect. I have people who call my program, lots of them, who are from England, who are from France, who are from the Scandinavian countries.
I'll give you England.
And almost right on down the line, they look upon us as being juvenile. They use all sorts of spicy language. They don't look upon it in any kind of juvenile way. They consider us to be like kindergarten children because we're so uptight about language and so uptight about sex and nudity.
I don't know where you got that information.
From every single one of those people I've ever spoken to.
France and many other countries, you'd never see or hear what you see, especially in television.
You've got to be kidding me.
If you're going to pay for a particular show to be piped into your home, that's your business.
Not true, sir.
But I don't know
what kind of society you're living in, and it's obvious from this conversation you're not really interested in hearing anything and learning something tonight. But if you really want to look at the real facts, next time they show a documentary on television commercials abroad, or they show anything that like the scene that they showed about the lingerie ads on television a couple of weeks ago in France and in England and some of the European countries, you'll find that their commercials are far more filled with nudity and revealing kind of material and sexual satire. Again, we're in the dark.
Okay.
Let me jump in here because I've got to take a break very shortly. But sir, there's one thing I want to say. I, Neil, everybody in the audience, I'm sure would be more than willing to support some form of censorship, some form of disregard for the First Amendment if it could be demonstrated where the language being used was doing some type of damage or harm to innocent individuals. And unless and until people can demonstrate that harm is being done and it behooves the person making the complaint to demonstrate the damage, then we're talking about censorship. And we're talking about illegal censorship. Just because you don't like to hear certain kind of words, just because you don't like certain kinds of conversation, is no reason to ban them.
May I say one quick thing?
One quick thing.
First of all, what I left out and wanted to start with, the 2 points here. Where does the First Amendment, do you really think either one of you gentlemen that our forefathers had anything in mind regarding the profanity
Sir, let me
say this,
sir. Our forefathers
perpetuate a conversation. You keep interrupting me.
Yeah, well, sir, I think Bob is, short on time, but I don't think you really want any answers. You asked a question which is immediately answerable.
Well, that type of dialogue.
If you do any kind of reading,
what you want to do is
that our forefathers
talk with your so-called non-profit organization, which I'm sure you've been being well paid, sir.
Unbelievable. That's incredible. Being well paid.
Yeah. Well, that's the best he can do, and of course, we know that he's still listening, so I will finish what I know that you were starting to say. Body language back at the time of the Constitution being put together, 1787, 200 years ago, was very, very common.
Does he know that Benjamin Franklin was a pornographer? In today's terms, Benjamin Franklin wrote some of the spiciest, under pen name, and some of the raciest novels that have ever been written, including every word that this man has ever heard, and probably some he's not familiar with.
Well, no, he's just one of this new growing league of psychics that we have in this nation that know precisely what the Founding Fathers were thinking. Let me take a quick break.
And I thought, well, maybe he was really, really sick more than what I thought. And when I went into the other room, he was watching television, and lo and behold, on the Italian television, which is run by the government, was what we would call a smoker. And the only person that was shocked about this whole thing was me. Everybody over there takes it literally. There's nothing wrong with it. But like I said, the only person that's shocked was me because I was born in this country.
And they don't have our degree of venereal disease or AIDS or rape or child abuse. Yep. It's not corrupting them because they're not uptight about it.
And let me tell you something. Them kids over there are more well-behaved than these kids are over here today.
Well, there's a word that ties in here. The word is hypocrisy. And we saw the hypocrisy with Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. And we see the hypocrisy with these self-proclaimed pious moralists who are so much better than the rest of us. and who think that because allegedly they don't use a few spicy phrases or words that makes them better people. And all it is hypocrisy. And our kids today are too intelligent. They're not so stupid as to not be able to see through all of this.
Well, this is very true. So that last caller better do a little traveling before he speaks up, because
yeah, he didn't know. He didn't have any idea what he was
really
talking
going to be in shock.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Clearwater, your turn at WPLP.
I was just wondering, I mean, I've been listening to all these callers, and just why is it that sex, which is a totally natural act, you know, one of the most beautiful things created, is considered filthy, while violence, you can show one guy having his brains blown off on nightly TV on Kids Hour.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid you touched on it right in the beginning of your sentence. A totally natural act for you, maybe for me, maybe for the guy on the other side of the glass over there, but it's not a totally natural act for most of the people who are so uptight about it.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's an unnatural act.
I think it's odd. I mean, in Europe, it's exactly the opposite. Violence, you should be ashamed of it. It's not shown on TV. And I've seen the figures, and, you know, gunshot, the deaths by guns is like, here is 10,000, there it's 77.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another reason that a lot of the Europeans look down upon our society, because of the kind of violent, aberrant society that we all live in, and the kind of fear and terror that we have to live under with the guns and all the shooting and the madness that goes on. They're not familiar with it. Mm-hmm. They just don't relate to it at all.
My personal belief, you know, with censorship or whatever, if the kids find it, instead of just, you know, snatching a Playboy away from the boy, sit down, what do you think about it? And, explain. Well, this really isn't, you know, morally right. And let the kids form their own opinion.
But why isn't it even morally right? Was anybody ever harmed by looking at a picture of a nude human being?
You know, or you know.
Or what about our friend who wrote the letter that I read in the first hour? You know, here again, I sat and listened for another week to all of this stuff going on. I wonder if that person was moved to go out into all kinds of despicable things because he's sitting there listening to it constantly.
Yeah, he must have had a real good time while he was listening.
Yeah, all by himself.
Yep.
You know, the problem is, you know, the adults don't let the kids form their own opinions. They want the kids to adopt the parents' morality. You know, they don't want...
No, they want what people want is for their children to adopt an idealistic morality that the parents don't even adopt.
They want the kids to believe what the parents think they should believe.
You got it. Now you really have it. You've hit the nail on the head.
And, you know, it's a sad case. In Europe, you know, the alcoholism is fairly low. So they get the kids into it. You know, they're young. They're given wine. It's no big thing. Here, it's... You can't have it till you're 18. You can't have it till you're 21. So it's a big deal here.
Mm-hmm.
It's no big deal in Europe.
It becomes a no-no, and as we all know, everybody wants to do no-nos.
Yeah.
I thank you very much, my young friend.
All right.
Be good. Neil, you're going to stay with me into the third hour. Let me take this opportunity for you to peddle your address one more time for contributions, then I'll peddle my address for people who want the petition.
Okay. For those people who would like, we can get in petitions from either end of it, but especially those who would like to contribute can send their check made out to SOFAR, S-O-F-A-R, P.O. Box 2214. That's 2214, Miami, and the zip code is 33055.
And if you would like the petition, you may send to me, again, care of SOFAR, a self-addressed stamped envelope, please. Large business size, number 10, I would prefer, although if you don't have one, that's okay. We'll work it out. To Post Office Box 48579. That's SOFAR, P.O. Box 48579, St. Pete, 33743. CBS News coming up at the top of the hour. Neil will stay with me into the third hour. We shall return. Do not venture very far.